morning. Committee will come to order. Today we meet to mark up H.R. 3521, the Department of Veterans Affairs VA Major Medical Facility Lease Authorization Act of 2013. H.R. 3521 would authorize 27 major medical facility leases requested by the Department in the fiscal year of 2013 and 2014 budget submission. Per the Budget Committee's guidance and assistance, the language of H.R. 3521 includes the appropriate congressional findings and budgetary treatment requirements to ensure that the legislation meets both the spirit and the intent of the House cut-go rule without the need for an offset. As we all know, when this committee was considering legislation to authorize VA's major medical facility leases in 2012, the CBO raised concerns about how to properly account for VA's lease authorizations. CBO's new scoring criteria has resulted in new challenges to our ability to authorize VA leases, as they now constitute significant direct spending costs. I committed on day one to work with the Department of Veterans Affairs and our colleagues to find a way forward. With the favorable reporting of H.R. 3521 this morning, that commitment will be one step closer to being fulfilled, and more importantly, our veterans in these 27 areas will be one step closer to receiving the care and services they need. I'm grateful in advance for the support and hard work of all committee members, in particular the ranking member, Mr. Michaud, this morning. I will now yield to Mr. Michaud this time for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree 100% with your remarks. I support H.R. 3521 and urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mike. As discussed, the first and only bill on our agenda this morning is H.R. 3521, the VA Major Medical Facility Lease Authorization Act of 2013, and I now call up H.R. 3521. The clerk shall report.
H.R. 3521 to authorize Department of Veterans Affairs major medical facility leases and for other purposes.
The bill was circulated in advance. All members should have had an opportunity to review pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and I would ask if any members wish to comment on H.R. 3521. Mr. Kaufman. Without objection, are there any comments? Mr. Flores, do you have a comment that you would expect to make?
No, sir, I don't.
Mr. Bilirakis?
Yes, I just want to thank both of you, Chairman Miller and Mr. Michaud, for straightening this out. This is very important to my constituents in Pasco County, that we consolidate the one and make one clinic as opposed to 5 clinics. It's going to be easier for our veterans, and thanks for working on this, and you made a commitment to us, and I appreciate it so very much. And I know that the Senate is looking at this bill, and hopefully it will be into law, and we can consolidate this particular clinic and all 27 throughout the country. But I appreciate all your good work.
Thank you, Mr. Bilirakis. Any other comments? Since no amendments were timely filed, the question now occurs on passage of H.R. 3521. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. I now recognize Mr. Michaud for a motion on favorably reporting H.R. 3521.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move that H.R. 3521 be reported favorably to the House of Representatives.
There's a motion before us to report H.R. 3521 favorably to the full House. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and H.R. 3521 is favorably reported to the full House. And again, my sincere thanks to all of the committee members, especially the ranking member, Mr. Michaud, for working so hard on behalf of our veterans this morning. Without objection, staff is authorized to make any technical, clerical, or conforming amendments as may be necessary to the bill favorably reported to the full committee. And again, members, thank you so much. This markup is now adjourned. And I do want to thank all the members for coming here in a timely fashion. I appreciate it very much, especially Mr. Lamborn. The committee will now come to order. Welcome to today's full committee hearing, Building VA's Future, Confronting Persistent Challenges in VA's Major Construction and Lease Programs. As some of you may know, in just about an hour, we are going to recognize 33 Native American tribes and bestow the Congressional Gold Medal upon the heroic and selfless Native American code talkers who provided invaluable, secure communication to Allied powers during World Wars I and II. Their courage, dedication, and honorable service enabled countless lives to be saved and victory to be won. In the interest of conducting today's business in sufficient time to allow both committee members and members of the audience today to participate in honoring and celebrating these brave men and women, I will submit my opening statement for the record. However, before I yield to the ranking member, I do want to note that we have just authorized 27 major medical facility leases per the department's request for the fiscal years 2013 and 14. At today's hearing, we will address serious deficiencies in VA's planning, design, and construction of lease projects that were authorized in 2009. VA should be on notice that the approval of H.R. 3521 in no way holds the department harmless for the mismanagement of major construction and facility leases that continues today. Moving forward, I expect the department to take immediate corrective actions to address the serious issues that have plagued the construction and the leasing programs so that the important projects that we have just authorized do not experience the same delays and cost overruns we have seen in the past. I now yield to our ranking member, Mr. Michaud of Maine, for any opening statements that he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask unanimous consent my opening remarks be submitted for the record.
Without objection,
I yield back the balance of my
thank you
time.
very much. First, I want to welcome our first and only panel of witnesses today. Thank you for coming. Joining us from VA, from the VA Inspector General is Linda Holliday. If you would please come forward, the Assistant Inspector General for Audits and Evaluations. Ms. Holliday is accompanied by Maureen Reagan, Counselor to the Inspector General. We're also joined by Lloyd Caldwell, the Director of Military Programs for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. From the VA, we're joined by Glenn Hagstrom, the Principal Executive Director for the Office of Acquisitions, Logistics, and Construction. Mr. Hagstrom is accompanied by Stella Fiotis, the Executive Director of the Office of Construction and Facilities Management. Thank you all for being here today. Ms. Holliday, we will begin with you. You may proceed with your testimony. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the results of VA Inspector General's work related to VA's construction and lease programs. With me today is Ms. Maureen Reagan, the Counselor for the Inspector General and the Director of the IG's Office of Contract Oversight. OIG reviews of VA's minor construction program, healthcare center leasing and activation process, and selected major construction projects have disclosed a pattern of poor oversight, ineffective planning, and mismanagement of capital assets in VA. We reported in 2012 that VA has not effectively managed the capital asset planning process to ensure minor construction projects are not changed significantly after approval, or that leased facilities are the right size and in the right location to ensure they are fully utilized. In our 2012 review of VA's minor construction program, we found that VHA had integrated the design and construction of 7 of 30 minor construction programs into 3 combined projects, which exceeded the minor construction spending limitation of $10 million. 3 other projects of the 30 reviewed were inappropriately supplemented with medical facility funds, also known as non-recurring maintenance funds. These projects had little, if any, project planning or oversight. The improper mixing of minor construction with NRM funding was due to premature approval of poorly planned and inadequately developed contracts for medical facility design and construction. To address the committee's interest in the management of VA's health care center lease procurement process, our review found no health care centers had been built, despite VA's original target completion of June 2012. Congress authorized approximately $150 million for 7 HCC facility activations. We also reported that VA could not provide accurate information on HCC spending into April 2013 because central cost tracking was not in place to ensure the transparency or accuracy of reporting all HCC expenditures. Further, the review of an anonymous complaint received in March 2013 involving the lease for the Butler, Pennsylvania Healthcare Center led to successful prosecution. We noted instances where facilities were leased and constructed, then stood empty and underutilized. And some of VA's construction projects, although they were properly authorized, were executed over budget and delivered well past their anticipated completion date. To serve veterans in both New Orleans, Louisiana, and Orlando, Florida, VA is constructing 2 new medical centers. Our review of the financing and budgeting for the construction of the medical center in New Orleans found nothing substantially wrong. However, we noted excessive delays and slippage. Most of it was due to the delivery of the site from the City of New Orleans and the need to remediate the hazardous substances identified after the site was transferred to and accepted by VA. To mitigate the construction delays, VA was adjusting the construction activities to meet the completion deadline. However, in the VA Medical Center in New Orleans, we reviewed contract change orders amounting to over $9.6 million. After a thorough review, we questioned about 30% of these costs. Lack of supporting documentation, inclusion of costs not associated in the work ordered, and overstatement of proposed costs were quickly brought to the attention of the VA contracting officer, and negotiations were held to ensure VA was going to pay only what it was owed. Our reports have motivated VA to review its minor construction policies and procedures. VA now ensures its construction program managers better track and monitor project timeliness and cost, as well as routinely compare approved designs with project scope to better manage changes. But given the practices in the past, such as ineffectively monitoring projects, untimely execution of leases, and inaccurately calculating program costs and savings, VA is not recognizing the full potential of its construction program. VA needs better oversight, improved capital planning, and stricter asset management to gain assurance that it can address construction and lease challenges more effectively. With good management and stewardship, there are opportunities to avoid cost increases and schedule delays. Efforts to ensure the adequacy of the processes, especially its project management process and oversight, will help reduce the examples like the ones highlighted in our statement. Regardless, budget, performance, and schedule risks are inherent in any effort to deliver construction projects. Further planning and managing capital assets to align with veterans' health care needs and new medical treatment changing how and where care is provided is a challenge. Thus, risk management and mitigation must be effectively addressed throughout the life of construction projects. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement today. Maureen Reagan and I will be pleased to answer any question on our respective work.
The committee thanks you for your testimony. Mr. Caldwell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Members of the committee, as the Director of Military Programs for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I provide leadership for the execution of the Corps' engineering and construction programs worldwide, to include our support for other agencies. I'm pleased to be with you today, and I will address our approach to delivering construction, specifically the construction of medical facilities. The Department of Defense construction program uses designated construction agents, of which the Corps of Engineers is one. The construction agents procure and execute the delivery of DoD infrastructure. The Corps has a long history of executing some of the nation's most challenging construction programs, both in our military missions as well as in our civil works responsibilities. We deliver a full range of medical facilities for Department of Defense to include hospitals. Regardless of the nature of a facility, the Corps has developed and refined processes and capabilities for design and construction. We think of four fundamental elements to deliver successful projects. One, learning what is needed. In that case, early involvement by the Corps with the project's using agency to understand and assist the requirements development, preferably in their planning and programming process. Two, planning the work. That is, engaging stakeholders to align scope, budget, and schedule. Three, executing the procurement, a team effort that concerns all stakeholders from design through construction. And four, managing the execution, a governance approach that requires oversight from the job site to Corps leadership. Throughout the process, we manage scope, cost, and schedule objectives. We integrate actions, and we evaluate issues and risks with the partners in the process to address and resolve them. Budget and schedule risks are inherent in executing construction projects, and medical facilities are among the most complex facilities for which we manage design and construction. They require close, frequent coordination with a large number of stakeholders. They are subject to changing requirements during construction, often due to evolving medical technology. We maintain a medical center of expertise to assist the Office of Defense Health Affairs and to ensure unique medical functions are properly included in the larger project delivery process. The Corps, as part of its interagency support, also has an established relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs, providing support for a range of facility construction and maintenance requirements. The Economy Act and our 2007 Interagency Memorandum of Agreement provide authority and basis for the Corps and the VA's collaborative work. Our Corps headquarters works with the VA's Office of Construction and Facility Management. Our Corps regional offices have developed relationships with 23 Veterans Integrated Service Network offices. In the past 2 years, the Corps has managed work at 74 VA facilities. We are currently assisting the VA to develop and implement an enterprise construction oversight capability, and we are collaborating with the VA to provide training opportunities. We value our support to the VA and to the veterans of the nation. We are pleased with the excellent working relationship that exists between our agencies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting the Corps to testify in this matter. I'm pleased to answer your and the other members' questions.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for your testimony. Mr. Hagstrom, welcome, and you are now recognized for your testimony for 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Mashad, distinguished members of the committee. I'm pleased to appear here today to update the committee on the Department of Veterans Affairs' continuing efforts to improve the management and timely execution of major construction and leased projects. Joining me this morning is Ms. Stella Fiotis, Executive Director of the Office of Construction and Facilities Management. I'll provide a brief oral statement and request that my full statement be included in the record.
Without objection.
The Department's facility programs are an integral part of our ongoing mission to care for and memorialize our nation's veterans. The Department is committed to meeting our responsibility to design, build, and deliver quality facilities as tools to meet the demand for access to health care and benefits. VA continues to improve its real property portfolio, providing state-of-the-art facilities that meet the needs of veterans, allowing for the highest standard of service. We have taken on the challenge of updating our aging infrastructure to meet increased workload demands, changing patient demographics, and services delivered closer to where veterans live. In the past 5 years, VA has delivered 75 major construction projects valued at over $3 billion that include the new medical center complex in Las Vegas, cemeteries, polytrauma facilities, spinal cord injury centers, a blind rehabilitation center, and community living centers. We continue work on 55 major construction projects valued at approximately $13 billion. The department has also opened 180 leased medical facilities, 50 of which are considered major leases. We have taken steps to improve the management and oversight of major construction projects, which include implementing the recommendations from the Government Accountability Office and the department's Construction Review Council. VA took aggressive action on the recommendations in the April 2013 GAO report, and all recommendations have since been closed. Additionally, we have implemented actions addressing the 4 major challenge areas as identified by the Construction Review Council, which is chaired by the Secretary of Veteran Affairs. These include recommendations to improve the development of requirements, design quality, funding, and program management and automation. Unfortunately, the department's major leasing program was not authorized by Congress for fiscal year 2013 as a result of the Congressional Budget Office's change in the budgetary treatment of the program. We are hopeful that for fiscal year 2014, authorization will be reinstated by Congress, permitting the department's current request for 27 projects that will serve the needs of approximately 340,000 veterans to move forward. In preparation of executing a future major leasing program, should it be authorized, and to improve the current ongoing program, VA is in the process of addressing recommendations in the October 2013 OIG report. These actions will be applied to future major leasing actions should authorization be restored. VA has a strong history of delivering facilities to serve veterans. The way the Office of Construction and Facilities Management is doing business today has changed significantly since the Orlando, Denver, and New Orleans projects were undertaken. The recommendations made from previous reports have resulted in positive changes and are being applied to the entire program, including the next 2 proposed major medical center replacement projects located in Louisville, Kentucky, and Omaha, Nebraska. Our focus on ensuring well-defined requirements and acquisition strategies that meet the project needs, assessing project risk, assuring timely project and contract administration, partnering with our construction and design contractors, early involvement of the medical equipment planning and procurement teams, applying the department's acquisition program management framework to our projects, and engaging in executive-level on-site project reviews along with monthly updates to the committee on key projects has led to improvements and transparency in our program. All these actions will help ensure the department's future capital program is delivered on time and within budget. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today. We look forward to answering any questions the committee may have.
Thank you much, Mr. Hagstrom, for your testimony on behalf of the department. We did just report favorably to the full House H.R. 3521, which does in fact authorize the 27 leases. Of course, we have to have a full House vote, and then in the Senate we'll have to act, but get ready. They're coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
To the Corps of Engineers, and what we're going to do, if we can, we're going to do two-minute rounds so that we can try to get everybody in, including myself. So if you would start the clock. Of the 6 Department of Defense leases listed in your, or medical facilities listed in your written statement as ongoing or as having been recently completed by the Corps, how many of the projects are currently or are completed on budget and on time?
Mr. Chairman, your question is directed to the Corps, and you're referring to leases. And
No, I corrected. Facilities. Take the word lease out. The Department of Defense medical facilities listed in your written statement, how many of those either are on time, on budget, or were completed on time or on budget?
Sir, I can get you specific numbers, but virtually all of those are completed with some time growth and some cost growth. We generally anticipate...
That means they're not on time and they're not on budget.
Sir, it means that we anticipate and understand that there's risk associated and unknowns associated with construction. We anticipate a 5% cost growth on projects, including medical projects, and provide that in the programmed amount for the projects. And we endeavor to operate within that 5%. On the whole, our experience is that we are operating within that 5%.
So you do plan on that 5%?
Yes, sir, we do.
Mr. Hagstrom, explain to us why 4 years after it was issued, the department is still in the process of implementing recommendations by the GAO made in 2009 concerning VA's major construction programs.
Mr. Chairman, to the best of my knowledge, we have implemented the recommendations from the GAO report in 2009. And among them were the importance of doing a risk assessment for both the cost and schedule. And shortly after the report was issued, in the future projects that we were undertaking, that was one of the major changes that we work very closely now with our architect and engineer firm of record on the project to accomplish that. Subsequent to moving forward with the new projects, we did go back and we started that process on older projects that we had started prior to the issuance of that report.
Thank you. Could I ask GAO if you concur with Mr. Hagstrom's statement in regards to VA fully responding?
I think you're asking VA OIG. And based on our reviews, we would think that while they might be responding, the implementation has not been sufficient.
Thank you. Mr. Michaud? Ms. Brown?
Thank you. Since I only have 2 minutes, I'm going to ask that my statement be placed in the record.
Always.
Thank you. Let me just say that this is, Mrs. Holliday, you mentioned New Orleans, that I'm very familiar with. I've been there twice, and you mentioned Orlando. But I wasn't clear on your feedback as far as Orlando, because I thought maybe you made a mistake and you were still talking about New Orleans when you should have been talking about Orlando. Will you take a look at that in your statement? My office have constantly, I've been with the chairman, we've been to Orlando several times. This project is over 25 years old, and I've been here 21 years, and we're still working on it. I will be there. I asked my staff to drive by there, and we do. And for the past, 3 months, we're still at 84% completion. I will be there Monday. I'm going to not only drive by, but I'm going to stop. I want to know, what is the problem? Why is it that we cannot complete the Orlando project? It's in my area. I was very instrumental in getting the authorization and the full funding. Now, I know everybody want to go down and to the right, but I want to know, why is it that we can't go down and to the right and help those veterans in Central Florida? Please.
Ms. Brown, first of all, I'd like to make it very clear that we agree with you that the project has taken too long to do, and there have been inherent problems which the VA has addressed in the past several years. I do want to make it clear, though, to the committee that in no case has any veteran who has been enrolled in the Veterans Health Care System has gone untreated for any maladies or issues that they have with regards to their health. The medical center director down there, Tim Lazert, has done an excellent job.
I think you might want, you're talking about Orlando area.
I am talking about
Okay.
Orlando.
Yes,
Sir. Tim Lazert, who is the medical center director, has done an excellent job in balancing the needs of what the veterans require, and we continue to do so. With regards to the execution of this project, there at early on was inherent. We had some problems, and VA moved quickly to address those problems. The issue here now is with contractor performance. And VA has taken every opportunity, as the chairman has often asked me to do, to partner with our prime contractor in an effort to move this forward. But when you go down there and you look at the project, there are inherent problems with the scheduling, the number of workers on the job to do this, the quality of the workmanship, and it goes on and on and on. And currently, VA is taking every opportunity to exercise our rights to ensure that the contractor moves forward.
Well, can you tell me why it is that we have not had any advancing in the completion in the last 3 months? I reviewed the reports, and it's stuck at 84%. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, perhaps I can get the answers to my question in writing, but I will be there Monday.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown, and if you would like to submit a question for the record, I'm sure Mr. Hagson would be glad to answer. Dr. Rowe.
Ms. Brown, I'd recommend you go every Monday. I believe I would. We've been building major projects since the pyramids, and there's nothing magic about building this. I've been involved in building 2 hospitals from ground up, and one a little bit, and several medical office buildings, schools, you name it, as a public official. And you decide what you have, what your budget is, what you can pay for in the private sector, what you allocate or appropriate in the public sector. You get an architect, you design it, you bid it out, and you, as you stated, there will be some cost adjustments, things you run across when you're building something you didn't anticipate. Everybody understands that. We're reinventing the wheel here. And especially in hospitals, I get a little frustrated, and I certainly share Ms. Brown's frustration, is that, and I did this with schools, it works, it's a great deal for architects when you redesign every school differently, and I realize every footpad is slightly different, the topography is a little different, but when you're building hospitals, an operating room, for the most part, is an operating room. And a patient care room is basically a patient care room, and a laboratory is a laboratory. I've been in hundreds of them over my career. Why wouldn't you cookie cutter build something basically why couldn't you do that? The VA is going to build a hospital, 2 more facilities. They're going to be redesigned from the ground up to look something different. You're going to pay a lot of money doing that. Why wouldn't there just be a standard that you could change a little bit, and instead of going 4 floors, 3 floors, but essentially a layout like that, instead of reinventing the wheel each time you do that?
Mr. Rowe, while the department does not have and use definitive designs, much like the Department of Defense does for many of their projects, we do have standardization across the department in terms of how we relate the various functions of a medical facility and so forth. I'd ask Ms. Fiotes if she would to comment on that, as that's part of her responsibility in CFM to work these standard module designs with our client.
Well, excuse me, not to interrupt, but it didn't working too well because we had the builders up here, what, Mr. Chairman, a year ago or something? The contractors have been begging for mercy. I mean, things have been changed in here, and they were asking us to help. I've never seen that in my life, where the first time, only time in 5 years I've been here that the contractor actually came up and asked for some help from Congress. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman. I'm over time.
Thank you. If Ms. Fiotes, if you would take his question for the record, we would appreciate that. Mr. Michaud.
I will do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for Inspector Generals. Repeatedly, the IG and the GAO has been pointed out serious issues with mismanagement, overage, delays in construction within the VA system. I guess I'd like to ask you a question is, what is your opinion regarding moving the authority for major constructions from VA to the Corps of Engineers?
I would be concerned with the lack of control that VA would have. I think communications is most important in defining the need and marrying up what is actually being implemented as part of the project. At this point, I understand that the processes aren't well defined as to how that would operate, whose responsibility, who would have what responsibility. And I think that before you would make a move of that magnitude, you have to look at that. A transfer of authority could entail some duplicity of capabilities within VA and render some of our workers non-productive because the work transfers. But we've had significant problems, although not with the Army Corps of Engineers, on the management of interagency agreements. the lack of control, the lack of transparency, the lack of ability to manage issues as they arise has been very problematic across VA in this, and this would be handled very, similar. So there are definitive risks that have to be managed, and if communications breaks down between the Army Corps and VA, then you know you're going to have problems with the construction site.
Dr. Benishak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Holliday, did you give us a number that there was like design changes in every single one of these projects that you described in your report?
The number I gave comes from a statistical sample of 30 projects that we looked at. So I did not quantify the number. I would have to give you that number as part of the record. So I give you a correct number.
I guess I'm kind of concerned about the idea of if you're planning for a 5% cost overrun from the very beginning. It sounds like, Mr. Hagstrom. I mean, I've done some construction projects as well, like Dr. Rowe talked about, and we sort of like to hold our contractors' feet to the fire. The contractors will say, well, you change the specifications, halfway through the project is going to cost you more. I've seen that, but I find it surprising that you're going to add 5% to the cost sort of automatically. I mean, how do you
Mr.
justify
Benishak,
that?
I think you'll find that standard practice in the construction industry. And when you say exceed cost, when you look at the past 5 years when VA has delivered 75 major construction projects for the use of our veterans at over $3 billion, 95% of those were delivered within cost. Because when you look at the cost and how we do the programming for a major construction project, we take into account as part of the appropriation and authorization request that there will be change orders associated with construction that's been validated both by the Office of the Inspector General and the GA.
Well, that sort of gets back to my question from the ideas. I mean, once you have a design, you're supposed to stick to it. I mean, you have to have the design done first and not have excessive amounts of change orders. I mean, that's what I was kind of getting to.
You're
Ms. Holliday,
absolutely
that
correct.
excessive change orders make things more expensive.
And that's one of the things that the department has done in this past year as part of the forensics and looking at our program, is that we found that when we had gone to Congress previously, we didn't have a well-defined set of requirements. And we've made major changes in how we approach that, and the very fact that before we would approach Congress for either an authorization or appropriation, we would achieve a 35% level of design. And I believe this is very similar to the way the Department of Defense and the Corps of Engineers and the Naval Facilities Engineering Command works in submission of their military construction program. So we are taking a close look at that and the best practices.
Could you just forward that changes that you've made in your
Certainly, sir. We have
to us?
provided to the committee the report out from the Secretary's Construction Review Council, and that is available to the committee. If you don't have it, we will again forward it to you.
Thank you. I'm out of time.
For the members' information, GAO report says as of November 2012, the cost increases for projects ranged from 59% to 144%, with a total increase of nearly $1.5 billion and the average increase of approximately $366 million. The delays in these projects range from 14 to 74 months, resulting in an average delay of 35 months per project. Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually wanted to follow up with your original line of questioning and to the IG. So you in answering the chair's question, you said that you hadn't seen a marked improvement since you gave your report on the overall management of design and construction with the VA. So what do you suggest now? What would be your suggestions?
The reason I made that comment is the new control with regards to really defining and putting final stamp of approval on the project scope is that there haven't been enough contracts to go through and see that the implementation of that control. It's immature at this point. I think it's a good control. I think it's appropriate to look at construction contracts that way, but I just do not have any evidence that the control will work as it's intended at this stage.
Thank you. And Mr. Hagstrom, you talked about 95% success. What is the percentage when you calculate the cost of change orders into your overall cost? What percentage? I mean, how do you calculate that? What is the percentage of, what is the amount for change orders in an overall cost scheme?
Just as Mr. Caldwell said, the way the Corps calculates those contingency funds is VA calculates them in a similar way, accounting for approximately 5% of the cost of the project.
Well, just the numbers don't seem to add up to me, but I don't understand why, and I think that's what we need to determine. I'll yield back.
If again, and I apologize, but Mr. Hagstrom, are you saying that all of your projects, major construction in particular, that every one of them has met the original budget?
Of the 75 projects, sir, only 4 did we come back to Congress to ask for an increase in an authorization or appropriation. All were delivered, all other projects were delivered within the appropriated amount. That's correct.
And the major projects that are existing now, how many of you come back asking for additional funds?
With regards to Orlando, Denver, or New Orleans?
Correct.
None.
Will you be?
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Right now, the way we look at it, we are on track.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Caldwell, has the VA contacted the Army Corps of Engineers for assistance on the projects in Orlando, Aurora, or New Orleans?
Sir, I'm not aware of all of those projects. I can tell you that in Orlando, yes, we have provided support to them in terms of providing estimate evaluations as well as schedule evaluations, and providing advice regarding some of the contract administration matters that they're dealing with.
Can you speak to some of the, I think the subject came up by the IG about interagency work, and I'm wondering if you could give examples of some other agencies outside of, say, the Department of Defense that you do work for.
I have a list of probably 12 other federal agencies that we provide support to. The total value of the support that we provided in FY13 was about $1.3 billion spread across a number of federal agencies: the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of State, USAID, the Department of Transportation. So I could go on and name a number of those that we have done that. And that support, I should point out, ranges from consultation, where we have some technical expertise that we can advise them, all the way to actually managing the execution of projects.
Okay. Could the Army Corps of Engineers aid and assist those projects if the VA requested help, the projects that the VA has?
We'd be pleased to work with the VA for anything they think that we could assist with. I should point out, for when you say those projects, if what you're referring to is projects that are underway and have some challenges currently associated with them, there is some question there about whether we could step in and make a difference in that project. What we could do is to assess the conditions and provide some consultation to VA in that regard.
Okay. But going forward, you could do projects for the VA as you do for other agencies, could you not?
Yes, sir. We could do that in a support role, much like a construction agent role. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final point, and that is that I think if we go back to the GAO report of April 30th of this year, I think it stated that the Army Corps of Engineers projects were consistently within schedule, within budget, and that the VA projects were consistently not not within schedule and not within the budget. I yield back.
Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions about how the VA deals with predictions of growth in populations that they serve. I represent an area in southern Nevada that had unprecedented growth for over a decade. And as we move away from the recession, we see that growth coming back in southern Nevada and across the Southwest, with a large number of veterans moving to those areas. I wonder what the VA does to predict the movement of veterans as when you are considering construction projects, to be sure they're in line with future needs, not just at one snapshot in time. I would ask that to Mr. Hagstrom. And then, Ms. Halliday, I would ask you, if in terms of future construction, has your office done any work to kind of look at whether the VA is effectively predicting and reacting to those potential demographic changes?
With regards to how the department goes about developing the requirements, while I'm not deeply involved in that, there are many databases that both VHA and other offices within the department use that track veterans enrollments, and those kinds of things. Certainly, I'd be happy to take that question for the record, and we can get you a more detailed answer.
Thank you. Ms. Halliday?
My office has looked at the National Cemetery Administration's how they're approaching and planning for rural veterans to be served as well as urban veterans. I do not have a report at this point. I expect to issue a report very shortly, and NCA has agreed essentially with us to change its definitions so that there is a very clear focus on rural veterans. So
Well,
that's the
fine
only
for rural veterans. I'm curious to see about if you have any plans or any ability to move resources or change construction goals if some place, say, is losing a population and some place is gaining one. But if y'all would look at that and get back to me, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. Ms. Kirkpatrick.
First of all, I thank the chairman and ranking member for continuing to have these hearings delving into the construction problems at the VA. And I applaud the VA for creating the Construction Review Council. That's a step in the right direction, but it's been exactly a year since they came up with their recommendations. And Mr. Hagstrom, I'd like to know what your timeline is for implementing those recommendations. It's a little amazing to me that not only have they not been implemented, but apparently there are no instructions to implement. So would you please address that?
Congresswoman, all those recommendations have been implemented. We have briefed the Secretary on that earlier this year. We told him what we did. We laid out the program for him. He concurred with it. We moved forward. When
Well,
you look at
I'm sorry to interrupt, but apparently not.
Requirements and the costing, we did achieve that major milestone with the submission of the fiscal year 13 program. We had designed to 35%.
Let me ask the Inspector General. In the report that we have in our record here, it says those have not been implemented. Are you changing your report?
We have not provided sufficient oversight of that since it's such a new change. In prep for this hearing, I tried to get the decisions that came from the council to look at those clearly to see about the implementation, and we were unable to do that.
Can you tell us why?
There are briefing slides with regards to the committee meeting to discuss the issues with constructions. What we had a hard time doing was determining those decisions that were made based on those discussions so we could track those for implementation. We were certainly scheduling that for oversight.
Okay, I yield back my time, but I'm very concerned about the disconnect with that.
Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hagstrom, what are your internal data measures to measure your success in accomplishing your milestones?
Mr. Rees, we are very focused on metrics in how we look at our program with regards to cost, schedule, and performance and quality of what our contractors are putting in place.
Can you give me 3 of your top examples of data-driven measurements of success that you follow, your top 3 priorities?
Cost, schedule, and performance. Those are our top 3. Those are what.
So how do you measure performance?
We measure performance against the schedule.
If it's done on schedule.
It's done in accordance with what we call the master schedule. Okay. That's applied against all.
So that's one. Can you give me 2 other very specific examples of how you measure success?
The cost. Are we remaining within the authorization and the appropriated cost? As we go through the project, we look at that through earned value management. And when we look at schedule. Is the contractor complying with the schedule that they provide us at the onset? And we look at performance in terms of quality and the number of workers on the job, and is that job being accomplished as it should be to meet the standards of the VA?
What are your top 2 poorest performing construction projects right now?
Right now, we're having a great deal of difficulty with the contractor in Orlando. And quite frankly, with the other projects, we're still within the acceptable limitations that we've set for ourselves. Orlando is the major project with regards to schedule.
Okay. And so what are those obstacles? What are those problems? And what are you doing to mitigate them?
When you look at in the future, what we've put in place from the Construction Review Council, I go back to the whole essence of a successful construction program is predicated on a clear definition of what the requirements are. And taking those requirements and translating them into a design that we can move forward with and have the assurances that at that point in the design, there should be little to few changes in the future as we go forward with it. At that point in time, we've developed a schedule for the execution of the program and also a very, very accurate cost in terms of what the overall cost of the program would be.
If you fail in achieving your data-driven measurements for success, what are your plans to correct that?
We work very closely with the contractor. We find ways to bring them back on schedule. How can we do that? How can we support them? We can look at value engineering in terms if costs start to exceed what they are. Are there things that we can do within the scope of the project that could potentially save money?
And how are you informing your veterans regarding whether or not you're achieving those success that are reliant on that facility to opening? Are you being transparent with your...
I believe we are. I know the medical centers have very robust programs at their respective locations where we have ongoing construction that continually meet with the veteran service organizations and the veterans in the area to keep them informed on the status of the project and where we're going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Ms. Negrete McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Hagstrom, thank you for attending today's hearing. The VA hospital at Loma Linda is the main hospital where veterans from, you have 4 members on this committee that get serviced by that. Mr. Cook, Mr. Takano, Mr. Reese, and myself, where they all seek treatment. In the OIG report, the health center lease for Loma Linda was not awarded until a few months ago. What were the issues at Loma Linda that led to the lease not being finalized until this year when it was authorized in 2009?
Congressman, when you look at these leases and the execution of the leases, I will say very upfront that there was a very aggressive timeline when these leases were submitted to Congress. As part of the OIG report, we were charged with developing a reasonable timeline to achieve these leases. And in doing so, we work closely with our client. So when you look at a major lease in terms of these 7 HCC leases and the process that we go through to secure the land and the developer, we are looking at a life cycle acquisition time of approximately 61 months. When you take a look at the Loma Linda lease specifically, there was a 46-month duration from the time it was authorized to the time that we signed the lease with the developer. However, when you look at that and you take into account things that were beyond the VA's control, there were 21 months within that whole process where we were going through negotiations with the city and the developer that took the excessive amount of time. So if you start to normalize these leases, these 7 leases, you will come back to the fact that taking out those things that VA had no control of, we were very much within the timeline of what we would say is approximately 26 months from the time we are soliciting an offer for land to the time we sign a lease with the developer.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you and the ranking member for keeping this committee focused on performance and accountability at the VA. Really appreciate that. And for Mr. Hagstrom, it was interesting to read the VFW statement for today's hearing, where they note that we'll need to invest over $23 billion over the next 10 years to complete our SCIP projects. At current requested funding levels, it'll take more than 67 years to complete our 10-year plan. The proposed Veterans Hospital in El Paso is number 79 on the list. So I've got some deep concerns, given everything that we heard today, given past reports by the GAO and the OIG. To cut to the quick, what can we do to move ourselves up on that list? What is the essential core criteria used to determine where a proposed hospital ranks on that list?
Mr. O'Rourke, the department uses the strategic capital investment planning process as part of helping to define what the most urgent and pressing needs of the department are. I would ask Ms. Fiotes if she would comment. She is part of the SCIP board that reviews these projects.
And before you do, let me add something to the questions and remarks made by Ms. Titus. In El Paso, you have more than 80,000 veterans who are underserved by the existing clinic. You've had Fort Bliss, which has gone from 8,000 active duty soldiers 6 years ago, perhaps when these lists were first made, to 33,000 active duty soldiers. And you also have an underutilization of the current VA because it is inadequate. And sometimes that underutilization is used as an argument for our placement on the list. So with that in mind, what can we do to make a better case to you and other members of the SCIP board?
Congressman, the SCIP board reviews projects that are scored in a very data-driven way based on a lot of the things that you mentioned.
Is utilization part of that?
Utilization is part of it. The movement of populations, the projected workloads, the existing infrastructure, all these things come into bear. And ultimately, the projects are scored using the basic criteria of ensuring safety and security at our facilities, meeting department initiatives, fixing what we have, right-sizing the inventory, providing value of our investment, and finally increasing access. Those are major criteria. They have several sub-criteria. It's very data-driven. It's very objective. And when those projects get presented to the SCIP board, the medical centers and the Veterans Integrated Service Networks have the opportunity to argue their case, if you will, or plead their case. It's very objective, very data-driven. I would say that the numbers fall out where they fall out.
Before I yield back, would you commit to meeting with me to discuss that issue of utilization and make sure that you all have all the data as you make these objective, data-driven decisions?
And I would ask in that case to also be accompanied by my colleague who actually runs the SCIP from a different office than our office. I participate on the board.
Thank you. Look forward to doing that. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Also, members, Dr. Rowe has said that he will stay and continue to chair this for those who may want to stay and have a second round of questions. Mr. Waltz, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member, and I encourage you to continue to ride herd on this issue because it is a challenge, and great points been brought up. Ms. Halliday, I will just like to comment, since I've come to Congress, I've been an unabashed fan of the IG's office, and the work you do never ceases to impress. I'm grateful for that. It helps us do our job better and helps your partners in VA do their job better, so thank you for that. Again, I think Mr. O'Rourke brought up a good point, Mr. Hagstrom. This is a big undertaking. The independent budget he was speaking of estimates that we've provided about 25% of the funding, but I have to be honest with you, I would be hard-pressed to provide more right now under the circumstances where we're having some of these challenges. I am absolutely convinced the VA does things, many things, incredibly well, world-class level. I'm yet convinced that building hospitals is one of them, and that's a challenge for me because I know how important they are. And I bring just one specific question, and I like Dr. Ruiz getting at some of the specifics in this. Each VA official who manages a major construction project, what are their defined roles and responsibility in the change order process? How does that work?
Congressman, we have taken the change order process very seriously as a result of the GAO report and issues we have dealt with our contractor in Denver. I'd ask Ms. Fiotti, she has been leading the initiative to look at how we do change orders, streamline that process, and be more effective in our ways that we do them.
Congressman, there are several parties involved in reviews of change orders, and change orders fall into three basic categories. They're usually errors or omissions in the design, they are unforeseen conditions, or they are owner-requested changes. And it is part of the nature of construction that change orders will arise in all three areas. Involved parties, the resident engineers who review the change orders for technical merit, our architect engineers and construction management consultants who review for cost validity and help us come up with our cost estimate, and ultimately the contracting officer who then negotiates the proposed change order with the contractor who submitted it. And many times it goes back and forth several times. Those are the parties and the key roles and responsibilities, if you will. We did assess that our change order process, while there was guidance in several places, it was not really consistent and consolidated in one place. We have proceeded since then to issue a handbook for our project managers and project executives so that they all follow a consistent process. We've inserted timelines to ensure the timeliness of the review of the change orders. We found that some change orders, either because the contractor wasn't pushing or because they just were not as critical, just fell by the wayside and
Okay.
were stale.
My time is going to be up, but I can't help get a really, really strong feeling that we're being told everything seems pretty good and on track and going and pretty much the norm. And the numbers, as one of my colleagues said, I'm having a hard time matching these up. So I may wait around for another round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Members, we've been joined by Mr. Micah from the east coast of Florida, who many of his veterans are in fact served by the hospital that's being constructed in Orlando, and I would like to ask unanimous consent that he be allowed to participate in the questions. Without objection, so ordered. And Mr. Micah is recognized for a round of questions, and Dr. Rowe, if you'll take the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank this committee for its continued vigilance and pursuit of, particularly on the construction side of VA hospitals and medical facilities, looking at some of the delays and problems we've had. As you know, we've had some serious problems in Orlando, and I think it was cited in the testimony that I heard that that's one of the roughest. We had sent from Central Florida a delegation letter regarding payments. Part of the problem we have in Orlando is the VA has kept changing the design, some of the requirements, and vendors are not being paid. When the vendors aren't being paid, we've had at least one go under, and we've had others that are in serious financial situations because tens of millions of dollars has not been paid. Can anyone respond to what we're doing? Is that Mr. I can't see without my glasses. Mr. Hagstrom?
Yes. Mr. Micah, that was the case initially back in 2012, early 2012. At that point in time, the VA sat down with both the contractor and the AE firms and addressed many of the issues that the contractor had brought forth. We had asked the contractor to prioritize those issues. Where in the design and the construction drawings did they have questions that they felt they needed additional information?
Well, some were pretty simple. I mean, I was in the development business, built nothing as big as the VA, but a simple, well, it sounds simple, but if you have a toilet and it's floor mounted and you change the specs to wall mounted after you've put the plumbing in the floor and you have to change it to the wall and support that, the plumber actually took me and showed me what had been drawn and then what was the new requirement and was having trouble getting paid for it. I mean, these are simple things where we need to get a quick resolution. You're telling me now that that has been the case?
When we execute a change order with the contractor may come to us with a proposal. The government will then pursue looking at an independent government contractor.
Well, just look at that one.
In order to pursue that work, we will always provide a level of
Look at that one and get back with me if you can and tell me if that contractor's been made whole. I don't have too much time. I know this clock goes pretty fast here. You're going to open the nursing home 120-bed facility next month?
That's correct, sir.
What about the domiciliary 60-bed unit?
I believe the domiciliary is scheduled to open in either January or February.
Okay, and looks like, what can you tell the committee as to the time of opening the hospital itself?
Currently, the legal extended completion date on the hospital was this past August. We issued Brassfield and Gorey a show cause notice. They then provided us a recovery schedule, and they told us April of 2014.
And you think we can hold to that?
Brassfield and Gorey, every month when they have submitted us an updated schedule, has continued to slip the hospital, and currently they are now projecting they would not be complete until September of 2014. The contractor continually slips to completion.
Okay, and part of that I heard is issues with electrical contractor. Can you get back to me or the committee and for the record what the issues are? I want them in the record. Do you leave this open for a week or 10 days, whatever? And let us know what the issues are so I have some record of what you're telling me and they're telling us is the issue right now. Can you do that?
We'd be pleased to do that.
Okay. Thank you. There are other questions, and if you would, I chair Investigative Oversight Subcommittee, Government Operations Subcommittee. I'd like a listing of all of your current VA properties that are vacant or underutilized. That's facilities, vacant buildings. We'll get the specifics to you, and if you could provide it to the committee and also a copy to me, because we're looking across the entire spectrum of the federal government for underutilized buildings, facilities, properties, assets that we're sitting on. Thank you, and I yield back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mike. I'll now yield 3 minutes to Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to join Mr. Walls in commending the work of the OIG. In addition to holding monthly town hall meetings, I hold a quarterly town hall meeting just for veterans in El Paso. And we'll get anywhere from 200 to 300 veterans who attend those meetings, and my entire presentation is driven from OIG findings in 7 key areas, and one of them that we look at is access. And right now, the score for the El Paso VHA is 39%. That's below the VISN, it's below the national average, and it's part of what I was bringing to the attention of Mr. Hagstrom is that we have an access problem. We're very far down on the list to have it addressed in any meaningful, comprehensive way. I fear that one of the criteria that's being used right now in terms of utilization is perhaps being misscored and not taking into account the broader picture. From your experience in the OIG's office, can you provide any direction to me in my office and how we can pursue that, or to the VA and how they can improve their scoring to take into account issues like those brought up by Ms. Titus and myself and other underutilized and underserved areas?
At this point, we would have to really spend more oversight on that. I think that it becomes a little bit subjective with how you score projects. Our focus had been on the rural health veterans and were they getting served appropriately, and looking at how rural health veterans were defined made a big difference between that and the general population. And I see that the National Cemetery is agreeing to start applying a methodology that we've actually presented to them so that they can ensure they don't have gaps in that service delivery. The next step, of course, is to look at the bigger picture of access to all the VA medical and see the same thing. But I don't have specific answers for you right now.
I would love to have the opportunity to speak with you about that and see if that is something that the OIG has either data on already or would be interested in pursuing in the future. And as I said earlier, one of the things that we would ask that you perhaps consider or look at is when our community historically has approached the VA about the need for a full-service hospital, we're met with this underutilization argument that not enough of your veterans are registered with or are using that. And we see that as a circular argument in that the care has been insufficient, and so veterans are opting not to take that. So I appreciate that, and I will yield back to the chair.
Thank you. The gentleman for yielding, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say first that I think that the VA has Veterans Administration has a comparative advantage when it comes to running cemeteries over the Department of the Army, and I think that the Department of the Army's Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, has a comparative advantage when it comes to doing construction projects. So maybe we can switch these functions around to which organization does a better job in a given area. Mr. Hagstrom, according to the testimony of Mr. Codwell of the Department of the Army Corps, the VA has the authority to work with the Army Corps on construction projects. Has the VA formally worked with the Corps on the current major projects in Orlando, Aurora, and New Orleans?
Mr. Kaufman, I do know we have a partnership with the Corps. We have, as Mr. Caldwell said, worked extensively with them on the Orlando project with regard to accessing some of their expertise when it came to looking at cost and scheduling. I also believe that as we entered into the Denver and New Orleans project, we tapped into the Corps' expertise with regards to the type of contract we were using, an integrated design and construct contract. Since it was relatively new acquisition vehicle to the department, we did ask the Corps to come take a look at the contract and do an assessment and provide us some feedback on that.
Given the fact that according to a GAO study on April 30th of this year, the Aurora project is, I believe, 144% over budget. In fact, is more so than any other project that you're working on. Why haven't you been shown more initiative in terms of reaching out to the Army Corps of Engineers to help assist on the Aurora project?
With regards to the GAO report, VA disagreed, and it's in our response to the GAO, in the way they calculated those costs. They looked at the cost from the inception, when it was in the infancy and planning stages, to ultimately what it was appropriated and authorized for. And they've taken all that and they said that's a cost growth. When we look at it, what we are working on, we requested $800 million in authorization and appropriation from the Congress. They provided that, and we are within that authorization and appropriation in executing this project.
Where are you at right now? I understand that the general contractor or the prime contractor is appealing the cost, and your cost estimate, I believe, is $604 million for the Aurora project, and the contractor is saying that it's going to cost over $1 billion to build the project. Where is that at? I understand there's a dispute resolution going on right now on that.
There is, Mr. Kaufman. Currently, it's in the Civilian Contract Board of Appeals. There's a series of meetings that will take place over the course of, I believe, the next 7 to 8 months. where the contracting board will look at both the submissions from the contractor and the department and make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman. Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask Ms. Holliday, it seems, in this hearing, the chair's data points with regards to projects and cost overruns and timeliness doesn't add up to VA's testimony with regards to that, saying that such a large percentage is on time and on cost. Can you help me and the committee to understand the differences here and how we reconcile this?
In most of our oversight, we have problems actually getting assurance that we have full costing through the projects. I think I'm on record as saying that there is a problem with not being able to track the full expenditures for the healthcare systems, the 7 that VA was trying to do. This is systemic. It goes across the department in the ability to really track all expenditures. So you definitely are going to have variables between, what was originally estimated and what the actual costs were. Maureen Reagan, who handles our contract oversight, looked specifically at the Orlando Medical Center and had found that almost 30% of the expenditures she looked at on change orders could not be validated or appeared inappropriate charges and claims from the contractor. I think that that's something that happens in the normal course of business, but with good processes and tracking of expenditures, you can sort this out. Unfortunately, VA does not have those systems to really track expenditures on a per project basis and ensure it gets all of its expenditures accounted for.
And does the Army Corps have a way to track costs?
Ma'am, we do. And it's important to understand that, especially with medical facilities, you may have sources of funds which are from different appropriations that come together. So when Mr. Hagstrom talks about the cost of a facility, as I think of that, I'm thinking of what amount has been authorized by Congress for that project. There may be other funds that are required for the initial outfitting of the contents of the facility as well. And when someone looks at a facility to try to sort out what the cost is, the question becomes which numbers are they looking at and for what purposes?
I understand. I just think it's certainly frustrating from my perspective that at least what the IG is saying is that there's really not a way within the VA to fully track the costs of a project. And that seems to be fundamentally problematic to me, that the scope and size of the projects that we're trying to undertake here, the importance of these facilities to our veterans, and our inability really to be able to track these costs. I mean, it just seems really honestly unbelievable to me in a way, and I think that it's something that we need to fully understand. And I understand, in large agencies and systemic problems, I understand that, but we must address the issue, and I think it must be fixed. I mean, this is fundamental to any major construction project, is that we should be able to track the costs, and our job partially is in oversight, and if it can't be done, then I don't know how we'll ever get our arms around some of these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for yielding. Ms. McLeod, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Mr. Hagstrom, what office was responsible for the management of the 7 healthcare center leases that have failed to come to fruition? It's hard for me to believe that the prospectus were allowed to be published in the budget books. Someone should have known that the timeline was unrealistic. Would you please walk me through the process as it exists then and as it exists now? Thank you.
Congresswoman, this is a joint effort between the Veterans Health Administration, and Ms. Fioti's office, the Office of Construction and Facilities Management. If I could ask Ms. Fioti's to comment on that. Well, let me take that. Better yet, when we look at this, the VHA looks at the databases that the department has in terms of the needs of the veterans, where they are, what type of health care needs are there. They will then come forward now through the SKIP process that was effective in 2013 to put this requirement as part of the overall portfolio needs of the department in moving forward of what the health care requirements are. These 7 projects were undertaken prior to the SKIP process, including the large leased process. So they come to us with a requirement in terms of size, location, those types of things. We then work with them to put a package together that we normally do what we call a 2-step procurement. Step 1 being putting a solicitation for offer out to the area for landholders who may be interested in selling their land to a developer for future development. Once we look at that, we come to an understanding of, is it in the defined area that we're asking for? And also, very importantly, we do due diligence with respect to federal requirements and environmental requirements at looking at that land to ensure that there's no contamination on it. We then enter into negotiations with that landholder, and we reach what we call an assignable title. That assignable title is never taken in VA's name. All it is an agreement to the purchase price of that land, and then once a developer is brought on board, the developer will take title and pay the landowner. Step 2 is to find a developer who will actually do the final design and construction and potentially hold the lease on that facility into the future.
Thank you for yielding. First of all, I'll ask just a couple of questions. Yield myself a few minutes. In some levity, the Colosseum in Rome was built in 8 years. Admittedly, they didn't have the EPA and a few things we have now, but they did get that construction project done from the ground up in 8 years. It looks like that's far going to surpass Orlando if it ever gets done. So I know that you're here. I appreciate what you're doing. I know that folks are trying to get the right thing done and get these projects done for veterans, because the goal, as Mr. O'Rourke clearly pointed out, is take care of veterans. I mean, that's the only reason for us to be here. And we need to do that in the most efficient way we can, because there's not an endless, bottomless pit of money. And I can assure you, and Ms. Brownlee brought this up, these cost overruns. The last project I dealt with myself personally was a $20-something million office building we built, our practice built. I can assure you there weren't cost overruns, because I signed my name to a note at a bank. It was me they were going to come after if we had those cost overruns. And I can assure you we got in under budget and on time. And I can assure you that the people involved in paying that note back were paying attention. And Mr. O'Rourke pointed out, and I think he's absolutely correct, is that we need to pay more attention here on the VA committee if we don't have systems in place that pay attention. And I'm trying to get my arms around what the chairman read out just a minute ago before he left. What the GAO found was costs substantially increased and schedules were delayed. It sounds like when I listen to the testimony that everything's going along fine, but then I read this: as of November 2012, the cost increases for these projects, that's Denver, Colorado, Las Vegas, Nevada, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Orlando, Florida. The cost increases of these projects range from 59 to 144%. It's a lot, with a total cost increase of nearly $1.5 billion. So we just appropriated more money, which then kept you within the budget. So I guess you can say that those projects were on budget, and an average increase of approximately $366 million. These delays were 14 months to 74 months, an average of 35 months, and so on. He's read that before. I guess what I'm going to ask you all is, are the IG, are the metrics in place now to prevent an Orlando or New Orleans or Denver again? Are the metrics there so that it won't happen? I know this would not have happened and did not happen in any of the projects that I've been involved in, numerous projects. But I was keeping my eye on the project too.
Mr. Rowe, we believe that the metrics are in place, but I think there are other factors that really come into play. And one is the reliance that both the Army Corps of Engineers and VA will have to contract to get these facilities stood up. So I'd like to give Maureen Reagan a little opportunity here to speak on her review of Orlando, because many of the problems that came about in Orlando were a direct result of the performance of the primary contractor.
Okay.
Thank you. We have not, I'll first say we have not published anything on Orlando. We did get complaints from a lot of subcontractors who said they weren't paid, and I think some of the names actually came from the committee for people for me to call. And I talked to all of them. And we do want to look at that issue, that a lot of them didn't get paid. They did go under. I think I heard 15 companies went bankrupt because they weren't paid. We had difficulty finding some of them. But one of the issues I learned was a lot of them were not direct subcontractors to Brosfield Gorey. Some were subs of subs of subs. When I talked in at least one case with one particular type of service, I did talk to the actual sub, and he said he got paid everything, and he paid his subs. We do intend to go in and look at it, but we had determined that the first thing was to get the building built. And if we're in there asking for records, interviewing people, and taking up people's time, that's going to delay the project even more. Because at this point, we weren't even sure in talking to the subs whether or not the change orders had been submitted to VA for payment. So a lot of issues come up in these projects that you don't exactly anticipate at the time. And one of them in this case was a lot of the subs walked off the job because they weren't getting paid. Then you have to get new subs to come in. And we did 2 change orders in Orlando that Brosfield Gorey had submitted. And I can say we had difficult time getting those, the review or the audit of those change orders done, because we couldn't get the records we needed from Brosfield Gorey and one of their large subs to do the review. And that's the reviews we found about a 30% overcharge.
I think that's perfectly acceptable behavior. If I'm a sub, the only thing I've got to sell are my skills and time, that I walk off the job if nobody's paid me for it. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable for them to do that, because they've lost that time. They can't get back, and their equipment and all that they've used, they've lost. So hopefully this is an isolated situation. And what I would like to see going forward is a white paper, maybe from the IG, a one-pager, so that we on the committee here can have an idea going forward, and this maybe the VA can help us out with this, going forward, what those metrics are. And I know we hired a project manager for any project that city did. We hired as our person on site to be there every day looking at that project to be sure it was going along as advertised. And there are penalties in there in most contracts that if you get done early, you get a reward. If you're late, there are penalties, and that's an incentive to get the project done on time and on schedule. But you can't completely come in, like he said, and pull a toilet out of the wall, and you plumbed it in the floor, and now you want it in the wall for whatever reason. I can't imagine why that was important. But anyway, it was, and here's this poor guy's not getting paid. So I want to ask if Mr. O'Rourke has any closing comments.
Mr. Chair, just briefly, I want to thank the Office of the OIG, the Corps, and the VA for being here. And I think it's the nature of these hearings that we're going to focus on where we have problems. And I know that there's so many things that you do well, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank you on behalf of the veterans that I serve for the facilities that we do have that are working, and the projects that you have executed successfully. But the urgency from me, and I think you're hearing it from many other members, is that we have the projects that we focused on today that are taking far too long, almost 10 years in the case of Denver. And you think about those veterans whose care we're deferring, for example, in El Paso, number 79 on the list. If we can't execute these, what does it mean for their hopes, or their, don't know how long it's going to take us, their children or their grandchildren's hopes that we're going to have adequate access and VA care in El Paso. So I look forward to working with you constructively in a partnership to find out how we do a better job in exercising oversight and managing the resources that are authorized and appropriated, and then also holding you accountable and working collaboratively and in some cases creatively to find other ways, maybe better ways to do these projects in the future. So I thank you for your participation. I thank the chair for yielding, and I will yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to thank you all, both on the oversight and investigation part and on the VA part, for trying to get these facilities done, and Corps of Engineers for getting these done in a timely fashion so we can take care of veterans. That's our purpose, our only reason for being here. Thank you all. The committee appreciates your time, and this hearing, with no further comment, is adjourned.